In the age of the internet, the young may be easily deceived, but not those of us who've lived long enough to see every trick in the book. My daughter-in-law is a professional online scammer, and the cruelest part? She used me, her own mother-in-law, as bait, exploiting the sympathy of kind strangers to make money off their compassion. But she underestimated one thing: I'm not as helpless as she thought. So how did I escape the clutches of that ruthless woman? Join me today, and I'll tell you exactly how I turned the tables. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if my story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video to support me. The truth deserves to be heard. The camera light blinked red, and I could already feel the heat of that false glow before my daughter-in-law Piper even said a word. She positioned her phone perfectly, making sure my wheelchair faced the soft window light. My hands trembled slightly, not just because of arthritis, but because of what was about to happen. She pressed record, and her tone switched instantly, dripping with sweetness, as she told the world how her sick mother-in-law was still working hard to prepare little gifts for lonely mothers. She smiled, wide, adjusted my shawl, and told me to keep my hands moving. I lifted the small box, wrapped it in paper, tied a bow with fingers that ached. The camera zoomed in on my face. I knew what they would see: hollow cheeks and tired eyes. But inside those eyes was something she never noticed: a cold stillness, a warning she mistook for weakness. Piper kept talking, praising me like I was a saint, then looking at the comments that poured in. Hearts, prayers, and donation links filled her screen. I sat silently, feeling the weight of every lie she spoke. Her perfume made the air heavy, the room too small. She ended the stream with a kiss on my cheek for show, then turned off the phone with a snap. The moment that fake smile faded, her voice cut like glass. She slapped my shoulder so hard the box fell to the floor. She told me to act more emotional next time, said I needed to cry, to look more grateful, to make people feel pity. I wanted to tell her the truth, that pity would soon change sides, but I stayed quiet. My silence had always been my strength, and she didn't know I was using it against her. I looked at the fallen gift box on the floor, ribbon loose and crooked. It was the perfect symbol of this house dressed up for Charity Hollow inside. She left the room humming, already counting money that didn't belong to her. I let the sound of her footsteps fade before I let my hands stop shaking. I looked straight at the dark screen of her phone, my reflection faint. If anyone replayed that live video, they might notice it too, the moment when my smile died before the feed ended. I used to believe that helping your children was the same as helping yourself. When Graham called one spring evening saying the house prices in North Carolina were perfect and that he and Piper had found a lovely 2-story near a school, my heart warmed instantly. I sold my little brick home in Cleveland Heights for $190,000, every penny I had saved from 30 years of teaching second grade. The day the buyer signed the papers, I stood in the empty living room, tracing the faint marks of my students' drawings on the wall, thinking how nice it would be to hear a child's laughter again when I moved in with my grandson someday. The transfer went smoothly through the bank. Graham and Piper were all smiles when I handed over the check. Piper even hugged me, saying how this was a new chapter for all of us. She promised I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore, no more bills or maintenance or property taxes. She said I could finally rest and enjoy being grandma full-time. Her words were sweet, practiced, the kind that make you want to believe. I didn't ask for a formal loan document, only wrote a small note by hand for the new home to be returned when able, and signed it. I told myself family didn't need lawyers. Family ran on trust. When the moving truck arrived, I followed behind in my old Buick, my life packed in cardboard boxes, labeled books, teaching stuff, and winter coats. The house in North Carolina looked perfect from the outside, a big porch with white railings, and a swing. Piper greeted me with her camera, all ready on filming a family moving day for her followers. She told them her sweet mother-in-law had sold her home to support her son's dream. I smiled because she asked me to, but inside, I felt a chill I couldn't name. The first few weeks were almost pleasant. I helped decorate the nursery, planted herbs in the backyard, made breakfast every morning. But slowly, I noticed the shift. Piper began locking certain cupboards, whispering on calls, spending hours online. The sweet gestures turned into clipped orders. And Graham, my only child, drifted further behind his glowing laptop screen. I kept telling myself it was just stress, that they were building their life. But sometimes late at night, when I heard Piper's laughter echo from another room, I felt like a guest in the house my sacrifice had built. At first, everything looked like the dream they had promised. Piper called me Mama Sophia, brought me coffee every morning, and even drove me to the farmer's market on Saturdays. She told her friends that having me around was like having a guardian angel in the house. I believed her. I wanted to believe that my son had found a kind woman, that my decision to sell everything and move here had been right. But it didn't take long before small cracks began to show beneath the picture-perfect surface. It started when I suggested we limit spending on online orders, maybe cook more at home. Piper's smile tightened. Her eyes turned sharp. From that day, I noticed she never called me Mama again. Gradually, my role in the house shifted. I began cooking every meal, folding laundry, and cleaning rooms that were never mine to begin with. Piper would spend mornings taking selfies with her perfect family, posting captions about gratitude and love, while I scrubbed the kitchen floor in the background. The same followers who praised her for being such a caring daughter-in-law didn't know that I washed the dishes from her brunch parties and stayed up late ironing her dresses. She said it was just temporary, that she was busy managing online campaigns, but I could feel the quiet distance forming. Graham was away most of the time working on a construction project in Florida. He sent money through Piper's account, trusting her to manage everything. Whenever I called him, she answered first, saying he was too tired or busy to talk. I told myself not to worry. I told myself that families go through phases. But the house started to feel colder, even under the Carolina sun. The breaking point came one morning. I was pouring milk into a bowl for the little ones when my hand slipped and the carton spilled across the counter. Piper's voice sliced through the kitchen. She shouted about waste, about how I should be more careful. The children froze wide-eyed. I tried to wipe the mess, my hands shaking, but what hurt more was seeing the fear in their faces. She scolded me as if I were a careless maid, not the woman who once rocked her husband's baby to sleep. That was the first time I realized respect doesn't survive in a house built on convenience. When I finally packed my suitcase that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. After one too many arguments about boundaries and expenses, I decided to leave. I found a small rented room near the local market with peeling wallpaper and a single window that looked out to a row of magnolia trees. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My pension check of $1,200 a month covered the rent and groceries, and for the first time in a long while, I could eat when I wanted sleep, when I wanted and read without anyone sighing about the light staying on. I thought that maybe peace didn't come from family after all, but from solitude. 3 months later, I decided to visit the children. I missed their giggles, the way little Evan used to run to me holding his toy truck, and the softness of Mia's curls when she fell asleep on my shoulder. When I arrived, the house felt different. Cold, silent, except for a sharp voice coming from the living room. The new nanny, a woman in her 40s, with a tight bun and a permanent frown, was scolding the children. I froze when she slapped Evan's small hand because he spilled juice on the carpet. The sound cracked something deep inside me. I stepped in before I could think. I told her to stop, my voice shaking but firm. She glared at me, muttering about how kids needed discipline, but I stood my ground. Evan clung to my skirt, and Mia hid behind the couch. In that moment, I knew I couldn't walk away again. I told Piper I would stay for a few days, just until she found someone better. She smiled too easily, agreeing right away. A few days became weeks, then months. Piper began leaving the house more often, claiming work events, wellness retreats, and content filming trips. Each time she left, the suitcases got heavier and her goodbyes shorter. I cooked, bathed the children, sang lullabies at night. My back ached, my hands grew rough, but when Evan whispered, "Grandma, don't go," I couldn't imagine leaving. Still, there were moments when I caught Piper on her live stream smiling with a perfect backdrop, calling herself a devoted mother. Thousands of people sent hearts and comments while I stood in the kitchen, wiping sticky fingerprints off the counter. Gratitude never came, not even a simple thank you. But I stayed because the children needed safety, and I had already lost too much to walk away again. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, one of those bright Carolina days when the air smelled of sunscreen and blooming jasmine. I had taken the children downtown to surprise Piper at the cosmetics store where she worked. The display windows sparkled with perfumes and pink lights, and I remember thinking how proud Graham would be to see his wife managing such a lovely place. But before I could even wave from the entrance, a scream tore through the air. A woman stormed in her face, red with fury, shouting at Piper so loudly that every customer froze. "You stole my husband!" she screamed before shoving over a stand of foundation bottles that shattered across the floor. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Piper stood speechless, her face drained of color, while phones lifted into the air, recording everything. I grabbed the children and held them close as the chaos spread. The store manager rushed out, trying to calm things down, but it was too late. The video was already online within the hour, and by evening, the local community page was flooded with comments. The words "affair" and "cosmetic girl scandal" trended faster than I could comprehend. By Monday, the company announced Piper's termination, citing the need to protect their reputation. That night, the house was silent, except for the ticking clock. Piper came into my room, eyes swollen, makeup smeared like ashes. She dropped to her knees beside my chair, crying that it wasn't what it looked like, that she had made a mistake but didn't want Graham to know. She begged me not to tell him, saying she'd lose everything. Her voice cracked when she said the children didn't deserve a broken home. I sat there, my heart heavy, watching this woman so proud, so cruel to me once now, trembling like a child. She took my hand, pressed her lips against it, tears spilling over. "Please, Mama Sophia," she whispered. "Give me one more chance. For them." I wanted to pull away, but something inside me softened. I thought of Graham, of how hard he worked, how fragile he'd always been with matters of the heart. I told her I would keep quiet for now. That promise felt small at first, almost harmless. But as I'd soon learn, silence can become a weapon in the wrong hands. That night when I turned off the lamp, I had no idea that my compassion would one day be used to trap me. I told myself it was only one secret, one small mercy to keep my family from falling apart. I convinced myself I was doing it for Graham, not for her. But silence has a strange way of growing roots. After the scandal faded from the internet, Piper began to change again. Her voice softer in public, colder at home. She never mentioned that night directly, but her eyes would flick toward me whenever Graham asked about her work, or why she was staying home so often. A single look from her was enough to remind me of what I was hiding. One evening, while I was folding the children's clothes, she came to the doorway and said quietly that honesty was dangerous for old people who couldn't remember things properly. She smiled when she said it, but the message behind that smile froze my spine. "If you tell Graham," she whispered later, "I'll tell him you're losing your mind. I'll say you make things up. I'll say you scare the kids." Her words slid through the air like thin knives. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly in the dark. I could already hear Graham's voice in my head, confused and distant, asking if I was all right, if maybe I needed to see a doctor. The thought of him doubting me of my son, believing her over me, was unbearable. I had seen too many mothers my age lose their families, not because they were wrong, but because no one listened. The next morning, I moved more carefully, spoke less. When Graham called, I smiled and told him everything was fine, that Piper was doing better. My hands trembled as I held the phone, pretending the lie was kindness. I told myself it was just until things got stable again, until she calmed down. But inside, I knew I had surrendered something precious, the right to speak. Weeks passed, and the silence became my routine. Piper's tone turned sharper, her control heavier. She decided what groceries to buy, who could visit when I could see the children. I was no longer the mother who once gave them a home. I had become the quiet shadow in the background, the witness who dared not speak. After Piper lost her job, the house seemed to fall into a strange rhythm where she was always leaving and I was always staying. Each morning, she dressed as if heading to a gala instead of an interview. Heels clicking across the kitchen tiles, designer bag swinging on her arm, a fresh coat of lipstick glowing like armor. She'd kiss the air near my cheek and say she was meeting a distributor or attending a product pitch. I wanted to believe her, but the truth always leaves traces. When I sorted the mail one afternoon, I found envelopes from Sephora, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Uber Black, all billed to Graham's shared credit card. The numbers startled me, hundreds spent in a single day. When I asked her about it gently, she laughed and said it was all networking, that appearances mattered if she wanted to get back into the beauty industry. Her tone was honeyed, but sharp enough to warn me not to push further. I folded the statements back into the drawer, along with my doubt. Meanwhile, my days stretched longer. I cooked 3 meals, changed diapers, cleaned spills, folded laundry, and rocked the children to sleep while my knees screamed in pain. My hands had grown rough, and every night I rubbed ointment into them, whispering small prayers that Graham would call. But he didn't. When I tried to bring up how tired I was, Piper would tilt her head with that practiced pity and say I shouldn't overexert myself, right before handing me another list of chores. Online, however, she was the perfect daughter-in-law. Her social media filled with glossy photos captioned, "Mother-in-law helping with the babies," while I chase my dreams or working late again, blessed to have such support. Thousands of people liked her posts, leaving comments about what a lucky woman she was to have a family so close. I sometimes wondered if they could see the truth hidden behind her filters, the swollen hands, the sleepless eyes, the old woman in the background holding a crying child. But I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth upsetting Graham, not when he worked so far away and trusted her so completely. If I told him the truth, he would say I was being dramatic, that I didn't understand modern life, that Piper just needed time. So I swallowed my words, pressing them down with each ache in my joints. Silence, once a shield, had become my prison. It happened on a cold February morning when the floor was slick from condensation and my knees ached more than usual. I was carrying a basin of laundry down the small back stairs when my leg gave out. The pain shot through me so sharply I saw white. I tumbled down 2 steps, the water spilling everywhere. The children screamed, and by the time Piper appeared, I was sitting on the landing, clutching my knee, breathless. At the local clinic, the doctor said it was severe arthritis and that I needed to rest for at least 3 months. Rest. The word felt almost like a punishment in this house where I was never allowed to stop moving. I used my pension and the last bit of savings I had tucked away to hire a private nurse. Her name was Lily. 28, kind-eyed, soft-spoken, a graduate nurse from Raleigh. She arrived with a small notebook and a steady calm that immediately filled the house with warmth I hadn't felt in years. She helped me with physical therapy, made breakfast, and even read the morning news aloud while I sipped tea. Within days, the children began following her everywhere, calling her Miss Lily, with that natural affection only kids can give. They laughed louder, played longer, and for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a cage. I could see Piper's smile tighten each time Lily walked into the room. At first, she pretended to be grateful, saying how nice it was that I had company. But soon, her tone changed. She began hovering around during Lily's shifts, asking unnecessary questions, watching us with a brittle politeness. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone, whispering about boundaries and not wanting strangers meddling in family affairs. What truly unsettled her wasn't the way the children clung to Lily. It was the idea that someone new might see what she was hiding. I noticed her spending more time on her laptop lately, working on something she called Hope for Moms, a supposed support fund for single mothers. She mentioned it casually, saying it was just an online test run, but I had seen enough receipts and donation alerts to know money was moving. Too much money. Sometimes I caught her glancing at Lily's open binder, where notes about medications and my therapy schedule were kept, as if fearing what else might be inside. Lily, unaware of the storm brewing, just kept helping humming softly while she worked. For the first time, I felt cared for. And for that reason alone, I knew it wouldn't last. It happened on a quiet morning that began like any other. Lily was sitting on the living room rug, with little Evan teaching him to sound out words from a picture book. The sunlight spilled through the window soft and golden, and for a moment, the house felt peaceful again. Then I heard the front door slam. Piper's heels struck the floor like gunshots. She marched straight toward them, eyes sharp, voice cutting through the air. I knew that tone too well, the one she used when she needed to prove power to an audience. She accused Lily of being too close to her children, of stepping into family matters that weren't hers. Lily tried to explain gently that she was only teaching, but Piper's voice rose higher, trembling with rage. I could feel the air tightening. The children froze, clutching the corners of the book. Before anyone could move, Piper slapped Lily across the face. The sound echoed in the room, sharp and shocking. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. Her cheek turned red instantly. Evan started crying, and Mia hid behind my wheelchair, terrified. Lily's voice broke as she said she would call the police. For a second, I almost wanted her to. I wanted someone, anyone, to see what was happening in this house. But then I looked at the children, trembling and confused, and the words that came out of me were different. Please, I begged, don't make a scene. They don't need more fear. Lily hesitated, tears streaming down her face, then nodded silently. She gathered her things, her hands shaking, and headed for the door. That was when Piper, with the calm cruelty of someone who had already planned it, pulled out her phone. She started recording, pretending to cry, saying Lily was quitting because she couldn't handle the stress. She even hugged the children, whispering that everything would be fine, while still pointing the camera at Lily's back. Later that afternoon, she sent the clip to Graham with a long message about how she was managing the household alone and how difficult things had become. I watched her do it, unable to stop her. My heart pounded with anger, but my body felt too heavy to fight. The house was silent again after Lily left, except for the soft hiccups of the children. I stared at the empty chair where Lily had sat every morning, the warmth already fading from the room. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this moment would mark the beginning of something darker. After Lily left, the house turned quiet again, but not for long. Within a week, Piper announced that she wanted to take care of me herself. She said it in front of Graham on a video call, her tone dripping with devotion, claiming she didn't trust anyone else with my fragile health. But what she really meant was that she had found a new stage. Soon I saw her transform the living room into something like a studio. a ring light tripod, soft background music, and boxes of cosmetics stacked neatly in pastel colors. She created an account called Hope for Moms, Real Stories of Love. At first it looked harmless, just short videos of her helping me cook or feeding the kids. She told the viewers that her dream was to build a community for mothers who struggle in silence. People loved it. They commented hearts and prayers, sent messages saying how inspiring she was. But the more attention she got, the more she leaned into the performance. She started filming dinner scenes where I had to sit beside her holding her hand while she spoke about hardship and family unity. The camera would zoom in on my trembling fingers, on my tired face. I became her prop. Then came the fundraising. She said she was launching her own skincare brand to empower single mothers. She even registered an EIN to make it look official, calling it a small nonprofit. But I knew she never filed anything with the IRS. It was all fake, every donation link, every emotional caption. All the payments went straight into her personal Venmo and PayPal. When I questioned her, she smiled and said, "Mama, you're part of something bigger now." During live streams, she'd sit beside me, tears glistening under the ring light, saying, "I just want my mother-in-law to feel better. If you've ever loved your mom, please share or donate." Then she would pass me a jar of cream, whispering, "Hold it up, Mama, and say thank you." My hands shook as I read the lines she wrote, pretending it was my voice, my gratitude. Thousands watched, hundreds donated. They saw a devoted daughter-in-law and her frail, grateful mother-in-law. What they didn't see was how she snapped the camera off afterward and ordered me to rehearse again, this time with more feeling. Every evening, the comments poured in praise, sympathy, money. Piper glowed in that light, radiant and adored. And I sat in the shadow beside her, realizing that the woman who once called me Mama had turned my illness into her business. Graham was always the steady voice at the end of the line, the one who made me believe everything would be all right. He worked as a civil engineer on long projects, and because his company provided housing, he was away for months at a time. He called once a week, smiling into the screen, as if the distance could be folded away by a few pixels. Each call showed the same carefully arranged scene, Piper sitting by my side, holding my hand, looking exhausted yet devoted. He believed what he saw and trusted her with the decisions he could not make from afar. I learned to keep my face calm for his video calls, to craft brief answers that sounded reassuring because I loved him, and I did not want to make his life heavier than it already was. The bills arrived in neat folders, neatly labeled and forwarded to Graham by email. Hospital invoices, prescriptions, receipts for medical supplies, everything looked official. Piper learned how to make things look real. She used templates she found online and filled them with numbers that matched what she told him. I remember seeing a file that listed medication and therapy sessions designed to pull on the heartstrings of anyone who read it. She said it was to be transparent, to prove she was doing the right thing. Graham accepted those documents without question. He trusted the neatness of paper and the glow of the screen. He sent money regularly, sometimes more than I thought necessary, and I felt a rush of gratitude mixed with shame. A few times I texted him, trying to warn him gently. I typed that I was tired and that maybe he should come home for a visit. He replied with the same calm conviction he always had, telling me not to worry, that he trusted Piper, that everything was under control. His words were like a soft blanket that smoothed the edge of my fear, but they also mended a dangerous silence. When he said trust her, his voice carried the weight of a man who did not see the small cruelties hidden between the threads of everyday life. I wanted to shout to name everything, but telling the truth felt like throwing a stone into a house of fragile glass. Loneliness settled into me like a second coat of clothes. I was watched, managed, kept on a schedule that suited someone else. The house became a stage where Piper directed compassion for the camera and handed me a script to follow. Anger and a sinking helplessness began to light inside me. I caught myself imagining a different kind of stage, one where I might take back a little of what had been taken. If she used the internet to weave a story and to ask strangers for money, then perhaps the same web could be a rope tossed to someone trying to climb out of a hole. I began to think about the tools she used, about accounts and platforms, and how evidence might be collected and shown. The idea grew quietly at first, like the first daybreak after a long night, and then it felt like a plan forming out of necessity. Graham believed the image, and that belief kept the pattern intact. But inside me, something shifted. I would not remain only a passive figure in a video. If the digital world could be used to make me small, then I would learn to use it to make myself seen. Piper's obsession with image turned into something larger than performance. It became business. One afternoon, she burst into my room, waving her laptop like a trophy. She announced that she was launching her own beauty line, a brand born from our story. She called it Hope for Moms. The way she said it made my stomach turn. She had registered the domain hopeformoms.us and showed me the soft pink logo with the slogan, "Because every mom deserves hope." Her voice trembled with excitement, or maybe greed. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. She said we were going to inspire the world, that our pain would help others. But I knew who she meant by we. Within days, her plan was everywhere. She posted photos of me sitting in my wheelchair beside the pastel boxes, my hands resting on jars of cream with her name printed in gold. The caption read, "We are turning pain into love." Strangers flooded the comments with sympathy and donations, calling Piper a saint, an angel, a fighter. I read their words and wondered if they'd still praise her if they knew the truth, that the only thing she turned pain into was profit. She opened a new Wells Fargo business account under her own name, but labeled it Hope for Moms Fund. The name alone fooled people into thinking it was a registered charity. She talked about transparency, about giving half of the profits to elderly mothers in need. She even showed me a document she proudly called a tax-exempt certificate. The logo of the IRS looked slightly off the edges, too clean, the text too smooth. I asked where she got it, and she smiled, saying Canva is a gift when you know what you're doing. I watched in disbelief as she built an empire of lies, brick by digital brick. She stayed up late drafting press releases, ordering influencer packages, designing ads full of stock photos of old women smiling. Sometimes she'd drag me into the camera frame and whisper, "Just smile, Mama. This is for good." The lights burned my eyes, and I wondered how many people would buy the illusion of kindness she was selling. At first, I wanted to believe that maybe some good could come of it, that maybe if people donated, someone somewhere would be helped. But then I saw the payments. Venmo, PayPal, direct transfers, all sent to her personal accounts. She tracked the numbers daily, her excitement rising with each sale. To the outside world, she was a hero. Inside this house, she was the puppeteer, and I was the story she controlled. The campaign took off faster than anyone could have imagined. Within 2 weeks, the Hope for Moms videos had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from strangers, saying how deeply they were moved by the story of a devoted daughter-in-law caring for her frail mother-in-law. They called it a miracle of modern kindness. The donations followed, first a few hundred, then thousands. By the end of the second week, Piper's personal account showed over $38,000. She smiled at the screen like a woman in love, whispering, "We did it, Mama." But I knew there was no we in this victory. The money didn't go to any mothers in need. It went to Piper's weekends. She started renting luxury Airbnbs by the lake, telling me she needed creative space to manage her business. She bought new handbags, a Coach purse, and Apple Watch, and boxes of clothes still sealed with tags. When I asked gently why she needed so many things, she said, "You wouldn't understand. This is how branding works." Her branding, I thought, was built on deceit. One night, while she was asleep, I heard an email notification from the kitchen computer. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. It was a Zelle receipt, $5,000, sent to someone named Grant Benson. The note read, "Supplier fee." But the name struck me. I remembered him. He had worked with her at the cosmetics store, the one she lost after that scandal. He was married. I stared at the receipt, realizing the money from Hope for Moms wasn't feeding anyone except her old affair. The next morning, I confronted her quietly, asking who Grant was. Her face went still, then she laughed coldly. She grabbed the mouse, deleted the email, and turned to me with eyes like polished glass. "Don't go digging through my business again," she said slowly, "unless you want Graham to know how you caused trouble in the house last year." Her words hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. She was rewriting reality again, twisting the truth until I doubted myself. Maybe I had overstepped. Maybe I was the problem. That was how her threats always worked. Not shouted, not violent, just soft enough to crawl under the skin. I went back to my room, knees weak, the glow from her phone lighting the hallway as she continued scrolling. She was sending messages again, probably to Grant. I could hear her laughing softly, the same laugh she used for her live streams. I sat in the dark and realized that my silence had built her empire. And now, that empire had become my cage. That night, the house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock in the hallway. Piper had fallen asleep upstairs after another long evening of live streaming. Her laughter still echoed in my head, the kind she used for her audience, not her family. I sat in the dark with Graham's old iPad on my lap, its cracked screen glowing weakly. My hands trembled as I typed, "You should check the joint account. Something isn't right." I hesitated before pressing send, afraid even the air might carry my words back to her. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floor made my heart pound. When morning came, I checked the iPad again, hoping to see a message from my son that would sound like the boy I raised, warm, curious kind. Instead, there were just 6 cold words waiting for me. "Don't worry, Mom." Piper sent the statements. "Rest." Those words broke something inside me. They were polite, distant, rehearsed. I could almost hear Piper dictating them. She had covered every track, managed every password, curated every document. The bank statements he saw weren't real. I knew it. She had full access to everything from the joint Wells Fargo account to the fabricated tax papers. My son was blind, and I was the ghost in the corner of my own story. I closed the iPad slowly, the blue light fading from my face. If I couldn't make him see, I would have to find another way. I fetched an old spiral notebook from my drawer, the one I used to keep lesson plans in back when I was teaching. On the first page, I wrote in shaky handwriting, "Hope for Moms, real spending." It became my secret ledger. Every day, while pretending to watch television or fold laundry, I took note of every delivery that arrived. Boxes of cosmetics, luxury candles, and strange, unmarked envelopes. I wrote down the dates, the brands, and the amounts I glimpsed on the phone screen whenever she logged in to check sales. Sometimes, when she left her phone on the counter, I took quick photos of the transactions: Zelle transfers, Venmo receipts, PayPal balances, all feeding the same personal account. It wasn't much, but it was something, a record. In America, I knew paper trails told the truth when people didn't. Each note, each photo, each scribble was a step toward reclaiming my reality. I didn't know yet how I'd use it, but I knew why. Piper could manipulate screens and speeches, but she couldn't erase handwriting, not mine. The living room no longer felt like home. It had become a studio built from pity. Piper rearranged everything: moved the coffee table, set up a ring light, and placed a folding table in front of my wheelchair. She stacked boxes of pink-labeled skincare cream and told me we were packaging gifts for supporters. What she meant was content. Every evening, she would start her live stream, the golden light glowing just right, soft music playing in the background. "You are my sunshine," slow and sentimental. She'd angle the camera to catch my trembling hands as I wrapped each tiny box. She spoke to her audience in that voice she had perfected, half tearful, half saintly. "My mother still insists on helping," she'd say, squeezing my shoulder as if it were affection. "She's fighting arthritis, but she keeps working for our community." I could hear the comments pinging in real time, people writing that they were inspired, that she was the daughter-in-law everyone should have. I wanted to tell them the truth, that I wasn't working for the community, I was working for her fear. But my mouth stayed shut, because even silence had become something she controlled. When I grew too tired, my fingers stiff and aching, she would lower her voice and remind me what she called the rules. No cooperation meant no Wi-Fi. No Wi-Fi meant no calls to Graham. Once she even hinted she could stop ordering my medication if I didn't try harder. Her threats were wrapped in sweetness, but the meaning was sharp as broken glass. It was psychological abuse, calculated, quiet, constant. She made me feel like a burden who needed her mercy to survive. Sometimes when the live stream ended and the room fell dark again, she'd replay the footage, analyzing it like a director reviewing a scene. "Next time, try to smile through the shaking," she'd say. "The audience loves bravery." I would nod, my eyes fixed on the dim reflection of myself on the screen, an old woman packaged and sold as inspiration. One night, when exhaustion got the better of me, I murmured, "I wish my son could see this." She froze mid-scroll, then reached over and shut off the camera. Her smile vanished. The room turned colder. "If he finds out," she said, her tone like ice, "you'll lose everything, even the kids." The words sank deep, heavy, and final. From that moment, I knew she wasn't just using me for pity. She was holding me hostage in my own life. It began as a whisper of rebellion, small enough to hide between layers of tissue paper. Every evening, when Piper turned the camera off and the house fell silent, I would stay behind under the warm yellow light of the living room. My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from purpose. In each thank you box that I was forced to prepare, I slipped in a tiny piece of torn notebook paper. The words were faint, written in pencil so soft it could be mistaken for shadow. "She's lying. Help me." I didn't plan it all at once. The idea came one night when I realized that if Piper could use these boxes to build her lies, I could use them to send out the truth. I picked the packages bound for faraway states, Oregon, Maine, Kansas, places where she rarely checked shipping details herself. Those were safe. Those were mine. It was dangerous, yes, but after so many months of silence, danger felt like air returning to my lungs. The act became my ritual. My fingers, once stiff from pain, grew precise again, steadying as I folded each sheet into corners of bubble wrap. Sometimes I would whisper the words under my breath like a prayer or a promise. The thought that someone somewhere might find the note and believe me gave me strength. Each slip of paper felt like a heartbeat escaping captivity. One afternoon, Piper nearly caught me. She was reviewing an order and noticed one box resealed unevenly. Her eyes narrowed. She opened it and stared at me for a long, suffocating second. My pulse roared in my ears. She asked if I had touched the shipments after she packed them. I forced a confused smile and said, "Maybe I mixed them up. I forget things sometimes." Her face softened just enough for me to breathe again. She muttered something about senior moments and went back to her laptop, though I could see the suspicion flickering behind her lashes. After that, she watched me more closely, counting boxes hovering near the table whenever I worked. But I didn't stop. I simply became more careful, writing smaller, folding, tighter, choosing random boxes late at night when she was asleep. I didn't know if any of the notes would ever reach someone who could help, but that didn't matter anymore. Hope, even silent, was still hope. And then came the twist of fate I couldn't have planned. One of those boxes, the one wrapped in gold paper and addressed to a subscriber in Vermont, was heading to someone who wasn't just a fan. He was a journalist, the kind who noticed details others ignored. I didn't know it yet, but the story Piper had built on lies was already cracking from within. In that moment, fear finally began to fade, replaced by something sharper, steadier. I told myself, if no one saves me, I will save myself. Because old age is not weakness. It is patience, sharpened by pain, waiting for the right time to strike. The spark came from a place neither Piper nor I could have imagined, a quiet home in Oregon, where a woman named Abigail Moore sat at her kitchen table with a half-opened package. She was 42, a social worker, who had spent years caring for her own elderly mother. She knew what fatigue looked like, what silent desperation felt like. The box was part of the Hope for Moms campaign she'd stumbled upon online. She had thought it looked sweet, a daughter-in-law and her aging mother sharing love through charity. But when she lifted the last piece of tissue paper, something small fluttered out. A torn piece of notebook paper folded twice. In faded pencil, the words read, "She's lying. Help me." Abigail froze. For a long moment, she just stared at the message, the handwriting shaky yet deliberate. It didn't look like a prank. There was something raw, something human, something that made her chest tighten. She snapped a photo of the note next to the Hope for Moms product box and posted it on Reddit, writing, "Is this old woman being exploited?" Within hours, the post exploded. Thousands of users shared it, each adding their own outrage and disbelief. The photo struck a nerve, an elderly woman's trembling hands, the supposed charity, and the haunting note. It spread across social media like wildfire. Some dug deeper, pulling up public information about Hope for Moms. What they found didn't line up. The PayPal business name didn't match the EIN Piper had listed. The website's tax-exempt certificate looked doctored. There were no official charity filings with the IRS. Users began tagging advocacy groups, elder abuse awareness, fraud alert network, and even forums where lawyers discussed online scams. What started as curiosity turned into a full-scale investigation by the internet. Strangers analyzed screenshots, matched product photos, and tracked down inconsistencies in Piper's LinkedIn profile and business registry. Someone noticed that every video had the same older woman, always quiet, always looking off camera, as if afraid to speak. That image burned into people's minds. Within a day, the hashtag #HellSophia began trending. The conversation shifted from pity to action. If this is real, one commenter wrote, "Someone needs to call Adult Protective Services." Abigail stayed online, responding carefully, helping direct people toward legitimate reporting channels. She didn't want chaos. She wanted justice. Somewhere in North Carolina, while Piper slept soundly after another fake live stream, I sat alone in my room, unaware of what was unfolding. My secret message, the one I thought might disappear into nothing, had finally found someone who listened. The post spread faster than anyone expected. By the second day, it had reached legal forums, advocacy groups, and even a few investigative journalists. Among those who saw it was Everett Hale, a 58-year-old attorney known for his work in elder financial exploitation and fraud cases. He had once won a major lawsuit against an insurance company in Florida that abandoned elderly clients. Calm, meticulous, and quietly relentless, Everett had a reputation for seeing the humanity inside every case file. When he saw the photo of my trembling hands and the note that read, "She's lying," help me something in his expression changed from concern to resolve. He dug through public records following the digital trail of hope for moms. The domain registration led him to a list of donor contacts, names, partial addresses, and one outdated email linked to a Sophia Hayes. It matched the handwriting on the note almost perfectly. That was enough. That afternoon, he composed an email. Subject: Are you safe? Message. Mrs. Hayes. My name is Everett Hale. I specialize in elder fraud and exploitation cases. I believe you may be in danger. If you need help, reply to this message using the word yes in the subject line. I'll handle the rest discreetly. Hours passed before the reply arrived. The subject line contained a single word: yes. There was no body text, no signature, only that word. For Everett, it was confirmation enough. For me, it was the first time in months that hope didn't feel like betrayal. He arranged a brief, encrypted video call the next morning. My hands shook as I clicked the link. His face appeared on the screen, gray-haired, calm eyes, steady but kind. He asked me to confirm my name, my location, and whether I could speak freely. I nodded, whispering short answers while glancing at the doorway, afraid Piper might hear. When I hesitated, he softened his tone, saying, "Mrs. Hayes, you are not alone anymore. If this woman is exploiting you or using your name for profit, you could be the key witness in a federal fraud case." The word witness struck through the fog of fear like a match catching light. For months I had been invisible, but now someone saw me not as content, not as a prop, but as a person who could fight back. I felt my spine straighten, my voice grow stronger. "Then let's start," I said quietly. Everett smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something powerful return to me, my will. Everett sent me instructions in short, careful messages that felt like lifelines. He told me to install a call recording app called Call Recorder on my old tablet and to set it to save files automatically. He said to name each file with the date and time so the recording would show when it happened, a small step that might make the difference in court. My hands shook as I followed his steps. The tablet was slow and clunky, but I learned how to toggle the recorder on and off without making a sound. Each time Piper raised her voice or said something that made my stomach drop, I pressed the button with a thumb that trembled and watched the little counter run. He taught me how to create a digital paper trail. Using the same tablet, he walked me through, logging into the Hope for Moms pages that Piper had built. We used the export CSV function from the payment dashboards to save transaction records. It felt strange to be the one pulling raw data, to see the flows of money laid out in columns and rows. Everett explained that CSV files are accepted by investigators and that exporting them created a digital footprint that could not be easily altered. He reminded me to save each file once on the tablet and once on a small USB drive that I had bought at the corner store. I hid the USB in a bottle of arthritis tablets on my bedside table. I wrapped the drive in a scrap of tissue and pushed it down among pills no one would touch. The trick made me feel foolish and brave at once, like a child burying a secret treasure. When I exported the CSV and saw transfers marked to names I did not recognize, my heart beat too fast. One entry said a $5,000 transfer to Grant Benson. I snapped a photo of the screen with my phone, careful to keep Piper from seeing. The picture went into a folder labeled Receipts that only I could open. Everett also walked me through recording in the moment. He said to keep the call recorder running during certain exchanges, especially when Piper made veiled threats about telling Graham that I was confused or dangerous. He explained how a clear time-stamped audio clip could show intent and coercion. He told me to speak calmly into the device if I could, to ask simple questions so her answers would be recorded. I felt ridiculous asking a machine to be my witness, but the machine did not judge. It only listened, and that tiny fact made me feel less alone. He wanted hard copies too. He told me to print lists of donors and any giveaway receipts I could find to show whether the donations went to the fund he had advertised or to private accounts. I used the library printer when Piper was out keeping the papers folded inside a cookbook on the shelf. Each printout was another small act of rebellion. Each paper might be what turned whispers into evidence. When Everett spoke on the screen, he was steady. He reminded me that laws exist to protect people like me, that misrepresentation of a charity violates federal rules enforced by both the Federal Trade Commission and the IRS. I listened and wrote down the steps. My hands still hurt from arthritis, but they were steady enough to pull the thread. I was collecting proof one quiet piece at a time, and for the first time in months, I believed I could turn this ship around. It happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind of day that felt quiet only on the surface. Piper had been restless for days, snapping at the children, pacing through the house like a shadow that couldn't find its place. That morning, she found my phone on the armrest of the couch. Her expression changed the moment she saw an unfamiliar number in the messages. Her voice rose sharp and cold. "Who were you texting, Mama?" I froze. She snatched the phone before I could answer, scrolling through the screen. When she couldn't open my email app, she ripped the Wi-Fi router from the wall and pulled the SIM card out of my phone. "No more internet." "It's for your safety," she said, though her tone was full of threat, not concern. Then she locked the door to the living room, leaving me inside with only my wheelchair and a cold cup of tea. "You'll stay here until you learn to behave," she called from the hallway. The word behave echoed like a chain tightening around my throat. But fear had long turned into strategy. I waited until the next delivery. The courier who often dropped off Piper's cosmetics orders, a kind young man named Derek, arrived that afternoon. When Piper stepped out to take a phone call, I wheeled myself to the front door and whispered through the crack. I handed him a small, unmarked envelope containing the USB drive I had hidden inside my arthritis pill bottle. "Please," I said softly, "send this to Attorney Everett Hale in Raleigh. It's very important." He looked confused but nodded, slipping the envelope into his pocket before she returned. Meanwhile, Everett had already sensed something was wrong. My messages had stopped abruptly. He didn't wait. Using the files I'd sent before the recordings, the screenshots, the bank statements, he compiled a full dossier and submitted an official fraud complaint to the North Carolina Office of Consumer Protection. He also forwarded copies to Adult Protective Services classifying the situation as elder financial exploitation. By the time the USB reached him 2 days later, the evidence was already validated. He uploaded everything to a secure legal server, creating a digital archive that met federal standards for criminal investigation. The timestamps, the audio metadata, even the CSV exports I had saved. They were now official exhibits. Back at home, Piper strutted through the house, believing she had silenced me. She bragged on her live streams about protecting her elderly mother from online scams, unaware that the real investigation was no longer hers to control. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was waiting quietly, deliberately, for the law to arrive. The storm began quietly with the click of a journalist's keyboard. Her name was Clara Jennings, a 37-year-old investigative reporter who wrote the Hidden Truths column for Atlantic Watch. Known for exposing scams dressed in compassion, she had a reputation for chasing stories that made people uncomfortable and for never missing her target. When Everett sent her the compiled evidence, the audio recordings, bank transactions, fake tax certificates, and my trembling photographs, she knew she had found something bigger than another charity scandal. She called it the perfect storm of deception, wrapped in virtue. Clara began her work the same way she always did, by listening. She reached out to several donors who had contributed to the Hope for Moms campaign, people who had left heartfelt comments online months earlier. Many responded quickly. One woman from Michigan told her she had donated $200 because the videos made her cry. Another from Arizona said she sent money every week, believing it went to elderly women in need. But when Clara asked if they had ever received a tax-deductible receipt or proof of donation, all 20 of them said no. Not one. That alone was enough to prove fraud under federal law. She organized her findings meticulously. Screenshots, bank documents, donor testimonies, layering them into a narrative that was both factual and devastating. The working title on her draft glowed on the screen: "The Kindness Con When Charity Turns into Exploitation." For the teaser photo, she chose the most haunting image Everett had sent: my wrinkled hand clutching a pink cosmetics jar, the same hand that had written, "She's lying. Help me." Clara's editor approved it immediately, calling it the kind of story that changes policy. Everett informed me of everything in his calm, deliberate tone. When the article goes live, he said, law enforcement will have the grounds to act. But you must be prepared for the storm, the press, the questions, and your family. I sat in my quiet room, watching sunlight tremble through the blinds, and thought about that word, storm. I had lived through tempests of silence, manipulation, and fear. But this one would be different. This time it would not destroy me. It would cleanse. Somewhere out there, Clara's article was taking shape. Each word, each quote tightening the circle around Piper. I could almost feel the hum of truth gathering momentum, ready to strike. The anniversary stream was supposed to be her grandest performance. Piper had spent weeks preparing for it. Pink banners, gold balloons, spelling out 1 year of hope. The living room transformed into a stage. She wore a rose-colored dress that shimmered under the ring light, and her voice carried the perfect blend of devotion and pride. "Everything I do," she said tearfully into the camera, "is for my mother. For every woman who's ever felt forgotten." The comments flooded in with hearts and praise. Over 50,000 viewers were watching live, along with a few local journalists invited to cover the charity success story. I sat quietly in my wheelchair at the edge of the frame, as always, the silent prop in her theater of compassion. But that day, something felt different in the air. Maybe it was the weight of truth pressing against the walls. Maybe it was the faint sound of footsteps outside. Piper was in the middle of her speech, one hand pressed dramatically over her chest, when a burst of light filled the room, camera flashes, but not hers. The front door swung open. Uniformed officers stepped in, followed by a tall man in a gray suit. It was Everett. His eyes met mine briefly before he turned to the officers. One of them raised his voice, firm and clear: "Federal Trade Commission Division of Consumer Protection. We are executing a search and seizure warrant related to fraudulent charitable activity under the entity Hope for Moms." For a split second, the entire live stream went silent. Then chaos broke loose. The chat exploded. "What's going on? Is this fake?" as viewers realized they were watching something real unfold. The camera was still rolling, capturing Piper's frozen smile as color drained from her face. She stammered, This must be a misunderstanding." But Everett stepped forward, holding a folder. "Ms. Piper Ford," he said evenly, "you are under investigation for misrepresentation of charity and elder exploitation. All accounts and assets are being seized pending federal review." The reporters who had come for a feel-good story were now snapping photos furiously, their flashes reflecting off the pink backdrop that read, "Hope for Moms." The irony was too sharp to ignore. I could hear the faint hum of my heartbeat in my ears as officers unplugged her devices and collected the product boxes stacked behind the camera. The ring light dimmed as someone shut it off. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything I could have said. For once, the audience watching the stream wasn't crying because of her story. They were witnessing justice in real time. The woman who built her fame on my weakness was finally stripped bare under the same light she once controlled. Piper tried to steady her smile, her lips twitching under the weight of the camera's glare. "There must be some misunderstanding," she muttered, voice trembling as she reached for the curtain behind the ring light. The pink satin shimmered, half hiding the chaos behind her. She wanted to end the stream to reclaim control of her stage. But before her hand could touch the fabric, a sound stopped her, the slow creak of my wheelchair, as I straightened my back. For a moment, no one moved. The officers paused. The cameras stayed fixed. I placed my trembling hand on the armrest and pushed myself upright. My knees were weak, but my voice was not. I lifted my chin and looked directly into the lens, the same lens that had captured my humiliation for months. My heart was pounding, but my words came out steady, each syllable clear as glass. "You can repaint your face, Piper," I said quietly. Yet the silence made my voice ring louder. "But no one can ever cover the stains on your heart." The air changed instantly. Every whisper in the room vanished. Even the hum of the camera seemed to stop. The microphone caught every word clean and sharp. Piper froze, eyes wide, her hand still clutching the curtain. Behind her makeup, a flush of panic spread like a crack in porcelain. For months, she had scripted my words, made me recite lines of gratitude and love. Now, for the first time, the story belonged to me. The strength I thought I had lost came flooding back, not in youth or beauty, but in truth. I could feel the weight of every woman who had ever been silenced standing with me in that room. A female reporter near the doorway lowered her pen, then wrote a single sentence on her notepad. The mother's words silenced the room. It would later become the headline's echo, the quote people repeated across networks, podcasts, and evening news. Piper tried to laugh it off, muttering something about misunderstanding again, but her voice cracked. No one believed her now. The audience watching online saw the truth written across her face, the collapse of performance, the exposure of rot behind kindness. I exhaled slowly, my body trembling, but my eyes stayed on the camera until the stream ended. I didn't need to move or shout. My words had already done what years of silence never could. Everett lifted a hand toward the technician and the room dimmed. The pink backdrop that had once glowed with hope for moms shimmered, then flickered out. In its place, the large monitor behind Piper came to life with a new image, the logo of Wells Fargo Bank, followed by a cascade of digital numbers. Rows of transactions scrolled across the screen, each line sharp and undeniable. Payments labeled transfer to Grant Benson appeared again and again. Then came a screenshot of an email, Love G, followed by a red heart emoji. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked. Even the live stream chat froze for a second as thousands of people watching tried to process what they were seeing. Piper's hand shot up toward the laptop, as if she could somehow shut it all off, but Everett's calm voice filled the room. "These are verified records," he said evenly, his tone neither cruel nor soft, just final. "Each transfer matches deposits made to private accounts, not to any registered charity. Hope for Moms is not and has never been a federally recognized nonprofit organization." The officers stepped closer as the next slide came up screenshots of Venmo and PayPal accounts tied to her personal name, followed by a forged IRS tax-exempt certificate, the same one she'd bragged about online. Then came the recordings. A low hiss filled the speakers before Piper's voice sliced through the air. "If you say anything, I'll have you put in a nursing home." The words echoed cold and venomous. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. The reporters looked stunned. Even the camera operators stopped moving for a moment. In the chat, comments flooded the screen. She threatened her own mother. "This is abuse. Karma's real." The final slide faded in photographs of Piper and Grant Benson, arms around each other. Champagne glasses raised, taken on weekends, she claimed to be hosting charity events. The contrast between the pictures and her carefully built, devoted daughter image was unbearable to watch. The camera turned back to me. I felt tears spill down my cheeks, but I didn't hide them. My lips pressed together, not in shame, but in strength. It wasn't joy that I felt, it was justice, finally catching up, slow but certain. For months I had lived in the quiet cage of her control. Now that silence had become proof, and that proof had become freedom. The audience stood in stunned silence. The officers began collecting her equipment while reporters scribbled furiously. Somewhere among the chaos, I heard Everett's voice again, low but steady. "Truth doesn't always come fast, but it always comes." And I believed him. When Graham walked through the front door that morning, it felt like the whole world stopped breathing. The air inside our house buzzed with voices and camera flashes, but all I saw was my son, my boy, frozen at the threshold, his suitcase still in hand. Everett had called him the night before, but I hadn't known if he would come. And now there he was, standing in the doorway, just as the officer's voice echoed through the living room. "You have the right to remain silent." Piper stood in the center of the chaos, her wrists locked in silver handcuffs. The woman who once posed as an angel of compassion now looked pale, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. She turned toward Graham, desperate, whispering his name. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the large projector screen behind her, the one that had been showing her fake charity logo moments before. Now it displayed something else. There, enlarged across the screen for everyone to see, were my trembling little notes. The same scraps of paper I had hidden in her thank you boxes. The words, "She's lying," filled the entire wall, glowing under the harsh lights. For months, those words had been my secret cry for help, written in fear, tucked away in silence. And now they were my freedom. I watched Graham's face as he realized what he was seeing. His eyes widened, and for the first time I saw truth dawn behind them, the truth I had begged him to see. He looked at me then. Just one glance, and I could tell that the weight of his disbelief, his guilt, his love, all of it, had fallen on him at once. I didn't need to say much. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "I warned you, Graham," I said softly. He took a step closer, his lips parting, but I didn't let the moment turn bitter. "But I forgive you." Those words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than any accusation. The cameras were still rolling, but the room had gone utterly still. Piper's protests turned into sobs behind us, and my son, the man who once turned away from me, dropped to his knees beside my wheelchair. His shoulders trembled as he pressed his forehead against my hand, whispering through broken breaths, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stroked his hair the way I used to when he was little, when life was simple, and love didn't need to defend itself. For a moment, I forgot about the cameras, the reporters, the flashing lights. It was just us, mother and son, finally standing on the same side of truth. Later, I heard that the footage was replayed on television across the country. They said my words silenced the room, but I didn't speak to silence anyone. I spoke because after all these years, I finally could. And as I looked at my son crying beside me, I realized something simple and eternal old truth always finds its way home. Piper screamed so loud it cut through the noise of cameras and shouts. Her face was streaked with tears and mascara as she lunged toward the microphone the officers hadn't yet taken. "I did it all for her," she cried, her voice cracking. "For my mother, for the community." But her words only made the crowd roar louder, not in sympathy, but in outrage. People shouted back, phones raised high, recording every desperate movement. Some laughed bitterly, others cursed. The story she had built for a year was burning down before her eyes, live, unfiltered, unstoppable. The live stream was still running. Over 60,000 people were watching now. The comments scrolled faster than the camera could focus. Lines of disbelief, fury, and justice pouring across the screen. "Karma's real. She used her own mother-in-law. This is elder abuse, lock her up." Each comment struck harder than any word I could have spoken. It was the verdict of 1,000 strangers delivered in real time. Piper tried to defend herself again, her voice breaking into sobs. "You don't understand," she pleaded. She needed help, but the crowd wasn't listening anymore. Every lens turned toward her was now a mirror reflecting the truth she had spent so long hiding. The same camera that once painted her as a saint now caught her lies, her greed, her downfall. Two officers stepped forward, their hands firm on her shoulders. "Ma'am, please step aside." She resisted for a moment, then her body gave out. They led her toward the door as flashes from the press followed her, each click sealing her fate. I watched silently. My heart didn't leap in triumph. It simply settled into a calm, heavy rhythm, the kind that comes when justice is finally done, even if it costs too much. I bowed my head and whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for peace. The light from the camera hit my face, half bright, half shadow. I could feel its warmth on one cheek and the cool void on the other, like a reminder of the thin line between kindness and exploitation. Maybe that was always the danger when love becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. Everett came to stand beside me. He rested a steady hand on my shoulder, his voice low and sure. "You did what hundreds of others couldn't," he said. "You made them see." I nodded, unable to speak, my eyes fixed on the doorway where Piper had just vanished. The chaos outside blurred into distant noise. Inside me, everything finally grew quiet. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every bench, cameras lined the hallway, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own story. I sat quietly, my hands folded on my lap, as the prosecutor read out the charges: commercial fraud, misrepresentation of charity, and elder abuse. Piper sat at the defendant's table, her head bowed. The same woman who once commanded the camera now looked small beneath its gaze. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged IRS certificate, the bank statements, the recordings of her threats, all laid bare before the court. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Piper's voice broke into sobs. She muttered something about pressure, about love twisted by ambition. I didn't look away. Compassion was still in me, but it no longer blinded me. Graham stood to testify. My heart clenched when I saw him walk to the stand, his hands shaking. "Your Honor," he said, voice hoarse, "I was blind. I let my wife control my mother's life and her money, and I believed every lie she told me. I'm filing for divorce and seeking full custody of our children. And I want to apologize to my mother publicly for not standing by her when she needed me." His words broke the silence, and I felt tears rise, not of pain, but of release. The court later ruled that I was entitled to restitution for damages, money taken through fraudulent use of my name. But when Everett asked if I wanted to accept it, I shook my head. "I don't want that money," I said softly. "I want the truth returned to justice, not to my wallet." The judge paused for a moment, then nodded with respect. It was the only victory I ever needed. After the case ended, Graham brought back Lily the nurse, who had once been dismissed unjustly. She walked into my home with the same gentle smile and said, "We'll start your therapy again, Mrs. Hayes, this time at your pace." My knees were weak, but my spirit was stronger than ever. Everett visited a few weeks later, carrying a folder with a new proposal. "You started a movement, Sophia," he said. "Let's make it real." Together, we registered a genuine nonprofit Real Hope for Moms, dedicated to helping women and the elderly escape manipulation and abuse. Everett agreed to serve as legal advisor. When the papers were signed, I felt the weight of my past settle into something lighter, like truth reborn as purpose. Sometimes I still think about Piper. Karma didn't come in fire or fury. It came in silence in the long, empty space where applause used to be. The morning was soft and golden, the kind of light that made everything look forgiven. I sat in the garden behind my house, the air filled with the laughter of my two grandchildren. They chased each other between the rows of lavender and daisies, their small hands brushing against the petals, their joy unburdened by the shadows of the past. I watched them with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The earth smelled alive again. The world, for once, was quiet. Graham sat beside me on the wooden bench holding a cup of coffee he'd brewed himself. The lines on his face looked deeper now, not from age, but from understanding. He looked down for a moment, then spoke softly. "Mom, I owe you an apology. And a real family." His voice cracked at the end, just enough to break the silence. I turned to him and smiled. "You already gave me one," I said, my tone steady but warm. "Because this," I gestured toward the children, the sunlight, the peace. "This is what a real family looks like." We sat there without speaking, the kind of silence that no longer hurt. After a while, I looked toward the horizon. The sun was rising, its light spilling across the garden like mercy itself. "Forgiveness," I whispered, "isn't about whether they deserve it. It's about whether you deserve peace." Graham nodded quietly, eyes glistening. On the small wooden table beside me sat a framed piece of paper, old, wrinkled, but preserved like a relic. Inside the frame were the words I once scribbled with trembling hands. "She's lying." The same words that once carried fear now stood for strength. I kept them there, not as a wound, but as a reminder that truth, once spoken, never dies. I reached out and touched the frame gently. The glass felt cool under my fingertips, the reflection of the morning sun bouncing off it like a promise. I thought about all the women out there, mothers, widows, grandmothers who still lived in silence, thinking kindness meant surrender. To them, if they ever hear my story, I would say this: don't let your compassion be your cage. Tell your truth, even if your voice shakes, because your courage might be the light someone else is waiting for.